everybody, my name is Ashley. Welcome back to Bella Bookshelf. Today I'm here to talk to you about the books that I read in May, but before I do that, while I have your attention, I want to direct you to a link down below of a blog post I made a couple of weeks ago with a huge list of resources to educate yourself on white privilege, some petition donation links. A lot of the organizations that I link for donations have since asked you divert your donations elsewhere, so please be mindful of that. I will add some more in when I'm finished with this video that are more updated. But at the end of the list, I also have a ton of Black-owned bookstores, Black arts initiatives, Black film festivals, etc. within Canada, in Toronto and in Vancouver and a couple of other places that deserve your support. And there's also a huge Twitter thread that I linked at the bottom of that post that has an amazing list of Black booktubers that deserve your support. Please check them out if you haven't already. And the other thing that I wanted to stress, that I also stressed in that post, is it's so important to get involved in politics at the local, federal, and provincial/state levels. So make sure you're doing your research into those platforms, look up what their concrete action plans are to support anti-racism, to support defunding the police, and vote. Voter turnout is so important, voter registration is so important, and it tends to be low, especially with young people, so please do your research into those platforms and turn out to vote, not only federally but also locally. And the last thing I want to say is racism happens every day, whether it is in the media or it's not in the media. So please continue to show your support, whether it's through donating if you have the means, through petitions, through educating yourself, educating those in your own circle. Really, it feels extremely insignificant to talk about the books that I read in May. However, I do still want to wrap up my Asian Readathon list for you today, so I'm going to go through those now. In terms of Asian Readathon, I have to say I did get quite lucky. I read a lot of really amazing books and it exposed me to so many different perspectives. I'm 100% doing it again next year. It was amazing. I told so many people about it. So the first book that I read for Asian Readathon was Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. If you're around the booktube community, you've probably heard about this, so I won't talk too much about it, but I did give it 4 out of 5 stars. And I watched the live show for the Little Fires read-along, and I forget whose channel it was on, but I'll make sure to link that down below. It was so good. The live show brought up so many good points about this book, so I highly suggest you check that out if you did read it. But basically, if you don't know, in this book we are following Mia and Pearl, who are a mother-daughter duo who moved to Shaker Heights, a town in Ohio, I believe? Yes. So it's this super perfect suburb where everything's measured and painted specifically, and Mia is an artist. She moves there with her daughter and rents an apartment from Elena Richardson, who is your sort of classic suburban mom who lives in a big house and cares a lot about appearances, etc. And the book centers around a custody case when a friend of Elena Richardson adopts a Chinese American baby and takes her off of a doorstep from a fire station, and a huge custody battle happens. And Mia and Elena are basically on opposing sides, but you also see how the families intertwine with each other. This book brought up a lot of good questions, a lot of good conversations, and I really enjoyed it. I have not yet watched the show, honestly, because I'm scared. I really liked the book, so I'm afraid that the show will not be as good. But if you've watched the show and you enjoyed it, let me know in the comments down below. Let me know if I should give it a watch. The next book that I read for Asian Readathon was Out by Natsuo Kirino, and this book was so good. Wow. Okay, so I gave it 5 out of 5. Basically, it is a crime thriller / horror novel, and before I tell you about it, I will say it is rated R, super graphic, huge trigger warnings for sexual violence. The biggest thing that I feel like would turn people away from this is how graphic it is, but if you are able to handle that, this book was amazing. Basically, we are following this group of 4 middle-aged women in Japan who work the night shift at a lunchbox factory, and they have these really crappy lives. They're struggling financially, they have not good home lives, their husbands or children, etc. are all causing them a lot of issues. And one night, one of the women in this group gets so fed up and she kills her husband. And it's all about these 4 women dealing with that murder, dealing with that body, and what happens, and that is what the synopsis describes. The synopsis, I will tell you right now, does not even scratch the surface of where this book goes. We get into Yakuza, we get into all these different crazy things that happen in this book. The last 100 pages, I could not get my eyes off this book. It was so good. But like I said, it's super graphic, so make sure you're prepared for that before you go into this. It actually honestly scares me that a child could pick this up at a public library and read this, because if you weren't ready for this could scar you. My partner and I buddy read this, and we, like 3 or 4 weeks later, still cannot stop talking about this. I definitely want to read more of Natsuo Kurino. This book was so exciting. The characters were amazing. I was so invested in what was going to happen to my favorite character, and this was just amazing, like so good. The next book that I read in May was The Island of Sea Woman by Lisa C. I also gave this book 5 out of 5. So like I said, I got super lucky this month. This book follows 2 women who grow up on the island of Jeju. I apologize if I'm pronouncing that wrong, but it's an island in Korea, and it follows their life. It's a dual timeline, so it follows their life in the 1940s during World War II and the Korean War, and then also modern day. And you see the struggles that they go through. I did not know a lot about the history of Korea, the history of the Korean War, etc. And that's one of the things that I love so much about historical fiction, is you get to learn about a time period while also getting a great story without reading like a textbook, so to speak. And so I really learned a lot about Korean history, and I learned a lot about these women. Jeju is very much a matriarchal society, and they basically become divers who go down to the bottom of the sea. They dive for abalone shell and different seafood to support their families. And I loved that dynamic. I loved learning about that. I loved reading about a matriarchal society. The stories of this woman broke my heart, but they were amazing. And if you're into historical fiction, definitely check this out. One of the other reasons that this book is so near and dear to my heart now is it really brought me closer with one of my really good friends who I met in university, who moved to Canada from Korea and then moved back to Korea. We still keep in touch, but when she was here, she started to explain to me a little bit about Korean history, but I had no background, so we didn't go too deep into it. But after I read this book, I learned a whole new perspective, and so I messaged her about this book, and we got to have this amazing conversation about the history, and she told me that she had been to the island. She talked to me about what it's really like there, and she invited me to go with her, and she said when obviously all of the coronavirus nonsense is over with, she would take me and show me around and tell me about what she knows. And the fact that this book opened up that conversation for me with her makes it so important to me. What this book did for me is what I think Asian Readathon is all about. The next book that I read in May was The Sun and Her Flowers by Rupi Kaur. I find it really difficult to rate poetry books. I give it 3 out of 5. That's not because I didn't like it and I wouldn't want people to read it. I liked the way this book was split up. So basically we have wilting, falling, rooting, rising, and blooming. And it's an amazing sort of transcendence through trauma and growing as a person. I also love Rupi Kaur's art. It's just these simple line drawings, but I love her art style, so I like how that's integrated throughout her poems. I actually think that I might like this better than Milk and Honey, but they're both amazing. So if you're into poetry and if you haven't picked this up, I mean, I feel like a lot of people have, but if you haven't, check it out for sure. The next and final book I have for you today, if you didn't see the pink flash, is Severance by Ling Ma. So I gave this 4 out of 5, basically only because it was the next contemporary that I read after Out, and so it was a tough book to follow, like, because Out was so amazing and I think it might be one of my favorite books of the year. Then I was like, is this a 5 out of 5 too? So I'm still struggling with it. I think I might reread it just to be sure. But essentially, I don't want to tell you too much about this book because I knew literally nothing about this book when I went into it, and that made it all the more better. All the more better? I don't know if that's proper English. Basically, there's this one quote that I want to share with you on the back that I feel like really describes this book well. And it's from Maris Kriesman from The Cut, and they said, "Extraordinary, Severance might just be the first and only coming-of-age immigrant experience, anti-capitalist zombie novel you'll ever need." So That really sums it up well. This book was super good. It's not a sci-fi. I wouldn't call it a sci-fi, even though it's sort of pandemic zombie apocalypse-y, which is a pandemic even sci-fi anymore? Because it's happening, so I don't know. It was much more contemporary heavy, which I liked. I'm not a huge sci-fi person. I like it sometimes, but this was more contemporary, so don't stray away from this if you're not like really into sci-fi. The characters were great. The only thing that you have to get used to with this book is there's no quotation marks anywhere. And I've noticed this is a new like style within contemporary fiction. I don't mind it. It takes me a little bit to get used to, especially if I'm following up a novel that had quotation marks. But I feel like that could bug some people, so just so you know, this happens. So if you read this book and you want to talk about it, please let me know in the comments below. Let me know what you thought of this. And that is everything I have for you today. There were 2 books that I did not get to. Uzumaki by Junji Ito, I am reading right now. I just didn't finish it before the end of May, so that will be on my June wrap-up. And then I also did not read Hotel Iris by Yoko Ogawa. However, I also want to fit that in June. And I did make one swap. There was one book that I originally said I was going to read, Soft Skin, I always mess it up. But I had a huge mess up with that on Amazon. I wasn't able to get it in time and the shipping was a nightmare, so I ended up picking up The Island of Sea Woman instead because I could just buy it at the bookstore in town. So I would also like to read that book at some point in time, however I can't get it right now. But if I am able to get an ebook or something, I will also try to read that in June and put it in my June wrap-up. That is, yeah, all I have for you today. I am so sorry that this video is like 3 weeks behind. Basically, I started a new job full-time and I'm still figuring out how to combine booktube with a full-time job, but I'm working on it and I'm definitely continuing. My videos just may be a little bit more spaced out, but I'm gonna make it work, no problem. And if you like my stuff, please click that subscribe button down below. I feel like I always point to the wrong corner. Please check out that post that I made with all of the resources. If you don't check out anything else, just check that out. And that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.